For 4 years, Nazi propaganda mocked the British Sten gun as a crude pipe assembled by amateurs. Then, in January 1945, Germany started mass-producing an exact copy of it, the MP-3008. This wasn't just desperation, this was ideological surrender. The nation that built the world's best tanks admitted the British were right about simple weapons all along. Here's the question. What does it mean when superior German engineering gives up and copies the enemy they spent years mocking? Let's start with what Germany was copying, the Sten gun. Designed in 1941, right after Dunkirk, when Britain was desperate for weapons, the design philosophy was brutally simple. Create the crudest submachine gun that would actually function. And crude it was. The receiver was a stamped steel tube, welded construction with no precision machining, side-mounted magazine that fed by gravity and jammed constantly. No wooden furniture, just bare metal. Cost? £2.50, about $10 in 1942. Production time? 5 man-hours from raw materials to finished weapon. German soldiers who captured Sten guns laughed at them. Nazi propaganda called it the plumber's pipe gun. One piece of German propaganda described British weapons as looking like they were made in a garden shed by amateurs. German soldiers said it looked homemade. The implication was clear. British manufacturing was so inferior they couldn't even make a proper weapon. German engineering was precise, quality-focused, superior. British engineering was rushed, crude, desperate. Britain produced 4 million of them between 1941 and 1945. It was reliable in mud, sand, and snow. Resistance fighters across occupied Europe loved it because it was simple to use and repair. And it killed plenty of German soldiers. The crude pipe gun was effective, but admitting that would undermine the propaganda narrative. So why did Germany need to copy it? Because by late 1944, Germany was collapsing. All Allied strategic bombing had destroyed the precision machinery needed for quality weapons production. Skilled machinists were dead or drafted into combat units. The factories that remained were prioritized for tanks and aircraft. The MP-40 submachine gun, Germany's standard, required about 25 man-hours and complex machining. Germany couldn't produce them fast enough anymore. Material shortages were catastrophic. High-grade steel was scarce. Aluminum was gone, all of it needed for aircraft. Even basic iron was becoming hard to source. Germany was literally melting down captured weapons for raw materials. The manpower crisis made everything worse. 6 million Germans were dead by late 1944. The Wehrmacht was drafting 15-year-old boys and 60-year-old men into the Volkssturm, the people's militia. These weren't trained soldiers. They needed weapons immediately. Simple weapons they could learn to use in days. Weapons that didn't require maintenance or expertise. The math was brutal. The MP-40 cost 70 Reichsmarks and took 25 man-hours to produce. Germany needed 1 million new submachine guns in a matter of months to arm the Volkssturm and replace combat losses. They couldn't make that many MP-40s with remaining industrial capacity. The solution? Copy the enemy's simplest gun. Germany had plenty of Sten guns to study. They'd captured thousands at Dunkirk in 1940, more in Crete in 1941, constant captures in North Africa from 1941 to 1943. The French resistance used Sten guns extensively after 1944, and Germany captured more. Tens of thousands of Sten guns fell into German hands over the war. The Waffenamt, Germany's ordnance office, studied captured Stens thoroughly. Their assessment? Primitively made but functionally adequate. They recognized it could be mass-produced with minimal tooling. But pride prevented copying. From 1941 to 1943, the Germans mocked the Sten and refused to consider copying it. By 1944, they had no choice. The result was the MP-3008. Official designation, Maschinenpistole 3008, nicknamed the Volksmaschinenpistole, the People's Submachine Gun. What did they change? Almost nothing. The key difference was magazine position. This was more reliable and better balanced. Some claim Germany moved the magazine to avoid violating British patents. Others say it was a genuine improvement. Either way, it admitted the basic British design worked. The stock was slightly different. The Sten used a skeletal wire stock or wooden stock depending on variant. The MP3008 used a simplified vertical grip and basic stock to work with materials available in Germany. Everything else was copied. Blowback operation, identical. 9mm parabellum, Germany's standard pistol round, stamped steel receiver, welded construction, simple bolt design. Overall length and weight nearly identical to the Sten. The design was 90% Sten gun. The vertical magazine was the only significant change, and that change was still an admission that the British base design was sound. Production was desperate and rushed. The design was finalized in late 1944. Production started in January 1945. It ended in May 1945 when Germany surrendered. 4 months of production time. Estimates of total production vary from 10,000 to 30,000 units. The most likely figure is about 15,000 total. Compare that to the MP40's 1 million units produced from 1940 to 1945. Where were they made? The New Munster factory in North Germany, some production at Mauserwerke, small workshops with improvised production. Allied bombing had forced scattered, decentralized production. Germany was making weapons in small metal shops because the big factories were destroyed or prioritized for other weapons. Production speed was claimed to be 5 to 7 man-hours per gun, even faster than the Sten in some cases. Quality was variable. Some were well-made and functioned adequately. Some were terrible with poor welds that made them unsafe to fire. There was no quality control. The priority was getting weapons out the door as fast as possible. Who got these weapons? Primarily the Volkssturm. Old men aged 45 to 60, young boys aged 14 to 16. They received minimal training, a few days at most. The MP3008 was perfect for them because it was simple to use and required no maintenance. Some late-war Waffen-SS units desperately under-equipped received MP3008s when MP40s weren't available. Wehrmacht rear units like police battalions and garrison troops got some. Combat frontline units still received MP40s when available. Where did they fight? Primarily in the Battle of Berlin in April and May 1945. Defense of German cities, last stands in collapsing pockets. The effectiveness was minimal. The war was already lost. How did they perform? Generally, they worked. Basic blowback operation is hard to screw up. The vertical magazine was actually more reliable than the Sten's side-mount magazine. But quality variants meant good ones were fine and bad ones jammed constantly. Accuracy was typical submachine gun accuracy, about 100 meters effective range, no better or worse than the Sten or MP40. Most users were untrained, so accuracy was irrelevant anyway. The reality is that by February 1945, weapon quality didn't matter. Soviet and Allied superiority was too overwhelming. Most MP3008 users were killed or captured quickly. The impact on the war was zero. Too late, too few. Limited evidence from soldiers suggests they were better than nothing, barely. Volkssturm troops were glad to have any weapon at all. Combat veterans who'd used real weapons preferred the MP40 or even captured Soviet PPSH-41 submachine guns. But the real story of the MP3008 isn't about combat performance. It's about ideological humiliation. Nazi propaganda in the early war years emphasized German engineering superiority. German weapons meant precision, quality, superiority. British weapons were crude, rushed, inferior. German worker craftsmanship versus British factory rush. This wasn't just marketing, it was ideology. The superior Aryan race produced superior weapons. The decadent British produced crude junk. Then, in 1945, Germany copied that crude junk, almost exactly. They spent years mocking the British pipe gun and then copied it. This was an admission. We were wrong and they were right. What did this mean? Engineering ideology had collapsed. The superior race needed the inferior British design. This was symbolic defeat before the military defeat was complete.
It's hard to maintain claims of superiority when you're desperately copying the enemy you mocked. Post-war German accounts show the embarrassment. Veterans rarely mention the MP3008 in memoirs. The MP40 was discussed proudly. The MP3008 was forgotten. It represented failure and humiliation. The Allies captured MP3008s after the war. Soviets captured most in Berlin and Eastern Germany. Americans and British captured some in the West. The Allied reaction was amusement. The Germans copied our gun. Post-war testing assessed the MP3008 as a crude copy of the Sten gun. The Allies had no interest in adopting it since they already had Stens. MP3008s are rare. Only 10,000 to 30,000 were made, and most were destroyed. Collector value is moderate, not as iconic as the MP40, but historically, it represents German collapse, not innovation. Germans find it embarrassing and rarely discuss it. The British saw it as vindication of Sten gun philosophy. It's a symbol of desperation engineering. The broader lesson matters. Germany's engineering philosophy in the early war was precision, complexity, quality. The British approach was simple, mass-producible, good enough. In the context of total war, the British philosophy won. Quality doesn't matter if you can't make enough. Simple beats complex in desperate times. Good enough times 1 million is better than perfect times 10,000. This pattern repeats. The AK-47, simple and reliable, versus early M16s, complex and temperamental. Soviet tank philosophy versus German tank philosophy. The lesson keeps appearing. Simplicity wins in mass production. Germany should have copied the Sten earlier. What if they'd adopted Sten-style simplicity in 1942? They could have armed millions more soldiers, saved resources for tanks and aircraft. Why didn't they? Pride. They couldn't admit British design was better. Ideology. Aryan superiority meant superior engineering. Bureaucracy. The Waffenamt was rigid and slow to adapt, and Hitler demanded wonder weapons, not simple guns. The cost was enormous. By delaying until 1945, the copying was pointless. If they'd done it in 1942, they could have made 2 to 3 million simple submachine guns. Impact? Maybe it extends the war 3 to 6 months. They still lose, but thousands more would have died. The ultimate irony makes this story perfect. Germans mocked the Sten, then copied it. The copy came too late to matter. The vertical magazine improvement admitted the British base design was sound. Copying an enemy weapon symbolized defeat. The Sten survived the war and armed dozens of nations afterward. The MP3008 vanished into obscurity.
Early in the war, German propaganda said British weapons looked like they were made in a garden shed. By 1945, Germany was literally making weapons in garden sheds, copying that British shed gun. Here's what this teaches us. Wars aren't won by the best engineering, they're won by the engineering you can actually produce at scale. The Sten gun was crude, ugly, and simple. It was also brilliant because Britain could make 4 million of them. The MP3008 was Germany admitting the British had been right all along. Sometimes the winner isn't who builds the best weapon, it's who builds enough weapons. And sometimes pride prevents you from learning that lesson until it's too late. The MP3008 is the engineering equivalent of surrender. Not surrender on the battlefield, surrender of the ideology that said German engineering was inherently superior. When you copy your enemy's crudest weapon, you're admitting they understood something you didn't. Britain understood that in total war, simple and mass-producible beats complex and perfect. Germany learned that lesson in January 1945, 4 months before they surrendered. And by then, it was far too late to matter.